Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, I'm going to react to US place names that I've been saying wrong. Now, this is a video by Lost in the Pond, probably the best channel on YouTube for sort of comparing the US and the UK, our cultures, way of life, food, stuff like that. And like I remember as a youngster, I used to think Illinois was pronounced Illinois because of the OIS. Like, you know, I grew up thinking that, you know, it was maybe a French word, and, you know, because like that, those three letters together in France is a wah sound, like voila sort of sound. So yeah, when I realized that I was saying it wrong, it was quite funny, to be fair. And it's got to be quite a few of these, you know, quite a few names that, you know, the average Brit thinks it's pronounced this way versus, you know, the actual way. So it's always going to be fun. Like, I love these kind of videos. I've watched the first one. This is part 2 of this series from Lawrence. It's going to be fun. Let's do it.
So I can see what the French were thinking, even if it is a little rude.
Let's go.
Hello, I'm Lawrence, and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond. And one of those, as we've seen before, is the way we say place names. You may recall at the beginning of Vlogmas, I did a little rundown of some of those American place names that have been giving me trouble over the years, and it turns out that I'd been mispronouncing. And it also turns out that those 7 were not isolated cases. In fact, all across the United States, you will find an absolute plethora, just because I love that word, of different American place names that I've been saying.
Do you guys use that word, plethora? I have not actually seen any American TV show where they've used that word. I'm trying to think. No.
Wrong my entire life, or at least for the last few years. And so without further ado, let us begin part 2 of this very series.
Wilkes-Barre.
Let me tell you a story. Not a particularly beautiful story by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a story nonetheless. A few years ago, some years after moving to the United States, I got a job in a call center. Woo! Okay. But one of the places that I had to call quite routinely because we had clients there was this city in Pennsylvania. And nobody at the call center could quite agree how you were supposed to pronounce it. It was really weird. It was something I'd never seen before. You don't often get sort of hyphenated names, both of which look like people's last names. But anyway, in this call center, we arrived on the pronunciation of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And, you know, for the last 7 years or so, I've just gone about my business believing that to be the correct pronunciation. Thanks, call center, because it turns out that's not true. And that's because the locals very definitively pronounce it one of several ways. So you've got Wilkes-Barre, apparently, or Wilkes-Barre, or Wilkes-Barre, but not Wilkes-Barre. Tell me in the comments, by the way, if you're from this city, what your pronunciation of it is.
Yeah, it's one of those weird ones where there's no obvious immediate way of pronouncing it. Like, if you see the word car, you just know it's car. You're not going to say care, are you? But actually, although I guess if you're from New Jersey, you might say get in the car. But yeah, like Wilkes-Barre, Wilkes-Barre, both could be correct.
Because those are the ones I found on the internet, and we all can trust that, I'm sure. But an interesting thing about this very city is it was in fact named after 2 members of the British Parliament, that is the 18th century British Parliament, one of whom was Irish, and that was the person in question here, the second name on this city. And he was actually of a French background, was Isaac Barre, so that last vowel did in fact have a French accent on it. It doesn't now in the city name, but it could give rise to why some locals, in fact most locals I think, actually add a vowel sound onto the end of the word. And while we're on the subject of places that were named after English things / people / places, that brings us on to our second entry.
Anyone who's watching this who's from this area, we'll call it Wilkes-Barre. How do you pronounce it? Can you spell it like phonetically in the comments, please? Newark, right? Delaware, Newark, Delaware. This one's pretty straightforward, isn't it?
Ah, yes, Newark, a town I know very well in England, not least of which because it has an unfortunate anagram, but also because there are several places in the United States named Newark. Of course, the most famous one is possibly the one in New Jersey, and I think most people in New Jersey would pronounce it Newark, but Delawareans have bucked the trend, which is great because I like to use that phrase. And while I was aware of the existence of both of these towns/cities, I didn't know for this whole time until I looked it up just recently that in Delaware they don't pronounce it like they do in New Jersey. They pronounce it Newark. So there's still an emphasis on that first syllable, but they also emphasize the word ark that's in there. So Raiders of the Lost Newark. That's not a film, but it could be, should be at this point. Interestingly, Newark, Delaware is actually located in Newcastle County, although Newcastle in this case is not spelled like it is back in England. It's two separate words, but that's just some fun trivia for you. Anyway, on to entry number 3, which is in New Jersey.
Hoboken. Hoboken? Hoboken?
I remember seeing this place name years ago and wrestling with myself, not literally, just sort of metaphor.
Could you imagine that, trying to wrestle with yourself?
Metaphorically or psychologically, about how to pronounce it. Clearly it's one of those place names with 3 distinct vowel sections, and I want to put the emphasis on all of them, not at the same time, that would be weird. Go through each of them and through trial and error determine which one sounds the best. So I tried Hoboken, but then so did Barbie, until she discarded him. And then I settled, I think, on Hoboken. So I put the emphasis on the middle syllable until I looked it up, and apparently neither of my first attempts were correct. People there, and I think just people in the United States in general, nobody gave me the memo, pronounce it Hoboken. Hoboken, the emphasis being on the first syllable, apparently. This is named after a place in Belgium, a district of Antwerp of the same name. So I'd be very interested to know if the Belgians, or indeed the Dutch in this case, because it was actually Dutch settlers as part of New Netherland that named this very town after the place in and around Antwerp. So I'd be very interested to know if there are any Dutch settlers watching this, if they could shed some light in the comments. Just realised that was hundreds of years ago.
I would have thought, like, just from, looking at the word, maybe it originated from the Native Americans, maybe. Kind of sounds like that sort of thing.
In the last few years, I got on a bit of a national park kick here in the United States, and still to this day want to try to visit as many of them as I can. I've even got one of those passports that they stamp. It's really good and really fun. But a lot of these national parks they're quite difficult to pronounce. Take, for example, Yosemite. Before I looked that one up, or somebody told me or corrected me, I don't remember which, I thought it was Yosemite. And
Same. I thought it was Yosemite. I
didn't grow up with Yosemite Sam, although in hindsight I did know him from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. He has a cameo. The point is, there are quite a lot of national parks where it's hard to pronounce them. Sequoia National Park is...
I've never seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Is it worth watching, guys? I think it came out quite a while ago, but doesn't it have like the Looney Tunes in there?
Another one. I'm not entirely convinced I got it right just there. But the one on the list today is this one. Now, I should say I've never been. I suppose I was close to it when I was in Pocatello, Idaho. It's just sort of across the Idaho border and into Wyoming. But this particular national park, I think I've always just instinctively pronounced it Grand Teton National Park. I don't know why. There's not a double T there in the middle of the word to point me in that direction. It's just something that I instinctively did without asking. And I think one of the things about these place names and all of the place names with which I've struggled is that I've usually only ever read them. I might have read them quite frequently, and I certainly have with this place and all of the sort of national parks that I just mentioned. I've just never heard it said out loud until very recently, when I became aware it's actually pronounced, not just locally, but I think by most people that know this in the United States, it's actually pronounced Grand Teton. There's actually quite a lewd way to remember this, and that is that the origin of this word, or the disputed origin of this word, is that it actually comes from French to mean teat. So the Grand Teat is what they believe the etymology of this very word is, although, like I said, some people do dispute that. I suppose that makes sense. I mean, Grand Teton itself is...
I'll probably remember that. I'll try and make that connection. Like, one way that I try and remember things that's quite efficient is to associate it with something that I think about a lot. So yeah, I think maybe I'll remember this one.
A mountain. So I can see what the French were thinking, even if it is a little rude. And I have to tell you, this is not the only French entry on this list, or should that be Frenchy? New word.
Des Moines.
Yes, the capital city of Iowa, a state that unfortunately
I guess you could pronounce it Des Moines, but yeah, I think Des Moines. I that would be my default pronunciation of it.
Still haven't been to, despite declaring my intention to do so some years ago. I will get there though, I promise, and I'll probably visit this very city. But before I do, I really ought to tune up on the way I pronounce it. Now, you're probably thinking that I've been pronouncing it all this time as Des Moines. No, not the case, not the case. In fact, I learned years ago that those S's were very much silent in this word just because of the French influence.
Yeah.
But it turns out that I've still not quite been getting it right. Really? I've been walking around this whole time, or just, lying around. I don't have to be walking while saying it. The point is, when I say it, I've been saying Des Moines, because that's sort of my corrupted attempt at French. But it turns out that the locals and sort of people from the surrounding areas actually pronounce it Des Moines. And I can almost see the French doing that too.
I think I've heard Des Moines actually said in a couple of shows, and that's probably why I know how to pronounce it. Yeah, to be honest. If let's say 10 years ago, if you'd asked me, I would have said maybe Des Moines. Yeah.
Des Moines instead of Des Moines. I think it's probably me getting it wrong, but then again, I'm not a French expert. Or a French spurt, which that can't be a word. Funnily enough, though, Des Moines in French actually means the monks, and it was named after the nearby river. So it was that river was actually the River of Monks. There's a sight you don't see every day. If you're a monk, let me know in the comments below if you still paddle in that river. There's no way that happens. Without further ado, let's move on to our penultimate entry.
What? Appomato. Hold on a minute. Appomattox.
So this is a place, of course, that has a strong presence in American history. It was at the courthouse in this very town that General E. Lee surrendered. But it was last year, I think.
And General E. Lee, I'm guessing, was he the leader of the Civil War? Like, I'm guessing that he was the leader of the Confederates, maybe?
During Vlogmas, no less, when I was taking a quiz on American history, and this question came up, and I couldn't pronounce the name for the life of me. I must have gone through about 1,000 phonetic iterations of this word. So there was Appomattox, Opomatox, Appomattox, Appomattox, just many different, lots of different things, until I arrived at the last one. I only arrived there because somebody corrected me a day later. So I suppose the correct pronunciation is Appomattox. It's a word not dissimilar in many ways to Potomac in the way it trips me up. You expect the emphasis to be on a different vowel sound, and it just isn't. And I think also, of course, the word...
It's got to be definitely descended from the Native American languages. Like a lot of Native American words that I've seen have a lot of syllables in there.
Potomac has its origins in Virginia, much like Appomattox, Native American history to it. In fact, it comes from the Appomattox tribe who lived in the lower banks of the river. No word yet on whether they encountered any monks. And from the land of apparently rivers to the land of 10,000 lakes.
Duluth.
So this one's quite embarrassing. I only worked out today that I've been saying this wrong my entire life, or at least for the last 7 years since I became aware of its existence. It's a city, of course, in Minnesota, and outside of Minneapolis-St. Paul. It is one of the sort of more well-known cities, I think, in Minnesota. And all this time, I've been pronouncing it more or less how you pronounce the airport in Washington, D.C. It's like Dulles with a lisp. Duluth, Minnesota, and
is that right?
I couldn't even see another way to pronounce it. I really couldn't. And again, it's one of those words, it's one of those place names I've only ever seen written down on a map many times because I'm constantly looking at the top.
How else could you pronounce it? Like Duluth, maybe? Duluth? Those are the only three ways. Duluth, and Duluth. Or Duluth.
of Minnesota to see if it really is a chef's hat. Have you done the whole from head to feet Louisiana thing? Forget it, never mind. Look it up later. The truth is though, this is not. I was shocked when I went to Wikipedia and I clicked the pronunciation play button. Duluth. What's Duluth? Well, again, it turns out it's actually of French origin. In fact, it's named very specifically for a French explorer who went by the name of Daniel Greysolon. That's a terrible pronunciation of his name, I'm sure. But he had a second part to his name, a title, which was Sieur de Luth. Again, butchered French. But it was that last part from which they get Duluth. And it used to be two separate words, D-U and then L-U-T-H. In fact, there was a time when, again, a la French, it was uppercase D, uppercase L, but still all one word. You could at least tell the way it was formed at that point. At this point, I'm not seeing, when I see the word, I don't see the sort of French origin behind it, so I'm not inclined to say Duluth. So it's Duluth. Duluth. Welcome to Duluth Airport. It's the wrong place. So if you live in Duluth, let me know if that's how you say it, and also if you've ever...
Yeah, please do, guys. Let me know if any of you guys pronounce the words on this list, the names, the place names, differently to how the official pronunciation is.
I've heard people say it like I've been saying it, and if you have to correct them, you won't have to correct me anymore. I vow from this day forward to pronounce all of these names correctly, and if I don't, you have my permission to slap me. That's, I mean, just metaphorically, or in the comments. We don't want physical violence. That's it for this episode. Again,
Another fun video from Lawrence of Lost in the Pond. I would have bet a decent amount of money that it was Duluth. Like, I don't know why, but I was just convinced it was. I feel like I've heard Americans pronounce it as Duluth in TV shows. Like, any of you guys like who are from America or from that region, do you pronounce it as Duluth or do you pronounce it as Duluth, the correct way? I feel like Duluth just rolls off the tongue a lot better. And there's probably way more place names that, you know, kind of have tricky pronunciations. I'm guessing, you know, if they descend from a foreign language, like, and English is your foreign language, there's just going to sort of be a misalignment there, and that's probably what causes the confusion, I think. But yeah, super fun video once again from Lawrence. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.